Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bayside SF Giants talk show. I, as always, am your host, Marc Delucci. Today, Kerry Crowley couldn't be here, and so we went to the bench. We had to dig deep into the reservoir. We have my friend Javier Reyes, who you may be familiar with from his work over at Just Baseball. He also hosts the Locked On Padres podcast and is a host of a new show, Baseball versus the World, on their little podcast network as well. You should definitely go and check it out. And I figured, obviously, this is a Giants focused show. We're going to talk about the Giants, but the Padres have seen a lot of the Giants. And so I figured to get an
Yeah.
outside perspective on the team and organization, since obviously Kerry and I, have covered the team for so long, we're kind of deep in the weeds of Giant stuff. I figured it'd be a nice change of pace to bring in someone else to get their perspective on the Giants. So, Javi, how are you doing these first few weeks of regular season baseball?
I'm doing great. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster at points because I mean, I always preach patience, but it's different this year because of how much the Padres preached patience all last year. And I've never, ever, ever in my life been more frustrated following a sports team, with the exception of maybe the 2010 Chargers, but that's another story. Um, it was really frustrating. So this year has been, oh, okay, you guys, you show up for one game and disappear the next. This is just like last year. And then they made the Dodger fans just have a conniption on Sunday Night Baseball, and it was fantastic. And I really enjoy every single time those dorks like lose their minds. So I think that's something that we both have in common. But it's been an up and down season, but definitely so many more good vibes. And I'm not just saying that because of the Dodger series, but before that, heading into this year, because last year, man, it was a nightmare. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of the gift of lower expectations too, right? Because
Hmm.
last year you're coming off the Padres were coming off the like near 90 wins. They obviously beat the Dodgers. They get to the NLCS, and then they make some more big additions. It's like now Soto's back for a whole year, so it was also I think the nature of it, despite the fact that I think you and I both had some decently high expectations for the Padres, despite all or it's kind of this like lukewarm of like they lost a lot, but also I
Hmm.
think they were better last year than they let on. And so,
Hmm.
like, there's definitely a road to seeding them to the wild card. I think I would have called them a wild card favorite. I think most people would have called them a wild card favorite.
Oh yeah.
But if they only win 82 games this year, the fan base isn't going to be happy about that. But I think it's a lot easier to be okay with that in
Mm.
Padres world than last year, where it's like the clock's ticking on Soto, and you have and Snell's going to be a free agent, and Hader's going to be a free agent. Where now it's like, okay, you only win 82 games, but Tatis still looks good. Jackson Merrill, like you have younger guys
Yeah.
popping up, and like there's like last year was like this is the culmination. We've built to this point where now you're
Yeah.
back building to something, which at least from like a fan morale kind of perspective, I think it's easier to buy into and like stay with, right?
Yeah, I think, and I still think that there's expectations, but you're right where I think that this is very much like a let's just have a good season and make the playoffs
Mm-hmm.
versus last year, which was like, yeah, you beat not just the Dodgers, but it's like you also beat the Mets too. So two
Yeah.
100 win teams. The Dodgers, who, from what I've told, they run the league according to their fan base, despite losing to everybody. And then you make it to the NLCS, and well, that series they only won I think one game in that series. It was still actually a close series that had like a lot of weird like one run, or I should say like one moment,
Mm-hmm.
crossroads
Yeah.
type of plays. And then they add Xander Bogaerts. Then you have a full year of Soto. Then you extend Darvish and Cronenworth, and then basically everything falls flat for the most part. And then you head into this year being like you lost Juan Soto and
And Blake
you
Snell and Josh
lost Blake Snell
Hader.
and Josh Hader, and it's like, I've seen Moneyball before, and they try to act like Isringhausen was a big deal. And Johnny David and Jason Giambi, which they mattered a lot. Don't get me wrong, but you know, Ewing theory, Moneyball theory, that's kind of the essence of the Padres right now. They're better without stars. Mark, you understand? I'm of course just kidding. There's still
You're
so much
talking to a
fun left.
Giants podcast,
Yeah.
so I'm sure Giants PR would love to take that clip. You're better. Really, we are. Yes, that's what we've been saying for 5 years. We're better without stars, right? No one cares. No.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
But yeah, so sort of shifting to what this podcast is supposed to be about. I'm going to toss to you like, what were your expectations for the Giants this season? I know we've obviously talked a bit about this off air and on again Baseball versus the World. Check it out. But what were your expectations for them coming into the year as you sort of were taking tabs on what your expectations for the division were? Yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah, with the Giants, I, I mean, I really do think that, and I think that this was kind of expected to a degree last year, but more so just the Padres. But I just love this division. I really do, and I think that it was reflected in the offseason. Even the Padres, who were stepping back, I think they were this rare team that stepped back, but it wasn't like, oh, we're quitting, which I think is what
Mhm.
happens with a lot of teams. It was more like, we can't do this another year in a row. We got to reset. We got to get rid of Soto, and they get a package, and
And there's
then
the
they also made
uniqueness
it
with the
Dylan
TV
Cease.
contract and the Bally
Exactly.
support situation. So, like, yeah, I mean, again, as someone, I would stand by and continue to say owners probably should be able to and can spend more money than they
Mhm.
do. But of the we are cutting payroll, the Padres, one, because they'd stretched so far in
Yeah.
the seasons leading up to it as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Then you have, Peter Seidler passes away. So they're actually like the rare example of, not necessarily being, the Guardians or the Brewers or the Rays, some other teams like that. And I'm excited about them. And then the Giants have the most money spent in free agency outside the Dodgers, who had the end game budget, but the Giants did a lot. And I think that I really like the stuff that they had done. And my thinking was, this is a smart team and they're weird. And I don't like predicting weird teams. I don't I've never ever made a bet or a prediction on the AL East for a reason. I refuse to do anything with the Tampa Bay Rays. The Giants are a little bit like that, but with the adage of the World Series, but with the minus of the overall playoff appearances. You know what I mean? So, like, if they make it, I do not want to face. And they're like the Miami Heat. It's like you don't want to face them. They just don't get
Honestly,
in their way.
that is really, I think, like aspirational what the Giants would love to be, right? Like they're
Yeah,
trying to be the Miami Heat. They just don't. They haven't found their Pat Riley yet.
exactly. They
Um,
don't have the Giants culture
or
or
maybe that's what
anything
Brian
like that.
Sabian was. Maybe Brian Sabian was the Pat
Maybe,
Riley of the way back. Uh,
maybe.
yeah.
Um, so you have all of that happen, and the D-backs also made some improvements. They get Jordan Montgomery, although late. You have
Mhm.
Eduardo
Eduardo
Rodriguez, both
Rodriguez
of which,
earlier in the offseason. Yeah.
yeah, and they add Eugenio Suarez. I think they made a couple bullpen additions, and they are just good. And they have young players who are probably going to get better, like Corbin Carroll. And then you have the Giants, like I said, who added so much, and I like them. I don't. My take is just that it's kind of foolish to bet on anyone to
Mm,
finish second in this division. I just don't really see. I mean, yes, the Padres have the star power, but they have weird vibes, and they can be,
yeah.
they've been very inconsistent this core. And then the Giants, they won 108, freaking games not too long
Yeah.
ago for no
3 years ago
reason.
at this
That's
point.
what it
Yeah.
feels like, for no reason. Brandon Crawford did something illegal, as far as I'm concerned, just randomly becoming Francisco Lindor for a
Hey,
year.
Nick Ahmed's on the
Um,
Giants now. You watch out.
I know. We love Nick Ahmed, sure. Um, I think I called him cute to a friend of mine as your starting shortstop. It was really mean of me. I'm like, I don't like being like that. I don't want to be like a Dodgers fan. So you have all of that, and it's been a little bit tumultuous of a start, I feel like, for the Giants.
Oh
They've
yeah.
had a couple of good things. The Matt Chapman data, I think, has been good for them with the hard hit stuff. I
Mhm.
think he's like up maybe in the top five in that, in some respects, in that area.
Where the whole
Jung
team
Hoo
has been
Lee.
hitting. I mean, it's one of the things, right? Like we can sort of touch on a
Mhm,
little bit. The Giants had, again, like obviously, if you listen to this pod, I imagine you're a Giants fan. I imagine you know how last week went for the Giants. But in case you didn't,
mhm.
Giants dropped both of their series, losing 2 out of 3 to the goddamn Nationals. They're now like one
Yeah.
in, like I think it's 2-7 against the Nationals over the past two
Uh-huh.
seasons. Absolutely, just frustrating beyond belief. And then they dropped 2 out of 3 to the Rays, but the one game they won against Tampa was kind of this like coming out party for the offense that was struggling to score more than 4 runs. Nate
Mhm.
Andrews scored 10 runs. Tyro Estrada, who's really was struggling out the gate, hits a pair of homers. Jorge Soler started his bats heating up. He hit a homer that game as well. And the team has been near the top of the league in terms of hard hit rate all year. Again, I do think hard hit rate can be deceiving because I think the Giants are hitting a decent amount of that hard contact straight into the ground, which undermines it a little bit. Like they don't have a lot of great elevators when it comes to
Mhm.
contact. But that said, Jung Hoo Lee looks like at the very least he's an average big league player, right? Which, and I should say, the data says he's at least an average, above average big league player. The current like traditional stats are potentially lagging behind a bit. He's been just, it's seemingly like his offensive numbers aren't very good. I still am pretty confident. I know you're quite high on Lee as well. That at the very least
Yeah.
they've solved their center field problem for the short term, which the Giants have been since
Yeah.
probably Pagan was is probably the last time they had a center fielder who they liked, right?
I think both of our teams have had a center field problem for a while.
Ooh,
And I
that's a
think
great
that,
point.
like, Trent Grisham was not the worst player in the world. I don't want to hand the
Yeah, he
guy,
had a
but the
year, right? You had like a gear
Mhm.
with Grisham, but then he fell off so quickly that
The
yeah,
bat to ball is just non-existent. And I
yeah.
think he's shown that with the Yankees. The power's there. Maybe someone one day can figure him out. He'll be in the league for a long time because of the glove, for sure. And he's like not a bad player to have as like a bench piece, but he was discouraging. Just so many poor at bats in big situations. This guy's bunting with the bases loaded. Like, Not even kidding, by the way. With 0 outs, like I've seen him do
Mhm.
stuff like that. Just not great. And then Jung Ho Lee, same thing, right? Like you bring this guy in, and yes, I am very high on him. If he ends up not doing well, it is my fault. Giants fans, I recently compared him to Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks over at Just Baseball. You can read to find out why. But I did that, and then the Padres have Jackson Merrill now, who is just, dare I say, the rookie of the year in the National League so far, and no one is talking about it, and certainly not ESPN's broadcasters on Sunday night. By the way,
Padres fans and Giants fans complaining about national media.
I know.
It
Look,
drives me up the wall, and that's again, like I admittedly I'm the Giants fan who isn't like super even steeped in the Dodgers rivalry. Rip me in the comments, guys. It's fine. I know this about myself. I'm just not invested in it.
yeah.
I just don't get much out of sports from hating, which I realize is not what's normal for most people. And again, I if
Nope.
that's what you do, that's fine. Go for it. But I it just ain't in me. But the level of Padres and Giants, national media hatred and jealousy in regards to the Dodgers always is very fun to me.
It's great. And my only thing is, I don't know if this is just a National League, like I'm sorry, not
National
a
League
National
West.
League like broadcast thing where
Oh,
whoever the home team is, they'll act more excited for. Like I can't speak fully for it, but I don't know. A lot of people seem to bring this up a lot, that they favor whoever the biggest market team is,
mhm.
but I could be wrong because I heard people say this about guys like Joe Buck before, and I just don't think that that's
Yeah.
entirely true. So whatever. But you know what? Screw it. I'm a Padres guy, so I'm gonna run with it, and I'm gonna say you dorks up in the booth were mad. And if Jackson Barrel was wearing a Dodgers jersey, maybe they talk about it more.
Shout
But
out to Natasha Wellinkar, who is also on the Bayside Baseball. You should check out a more broad Bay Area baseball podcast that will be airing every other Saturday, co-hosted by her and Steven Risotto, who very much buys it and very much believes the national media has it out for the Giants. I will, and every time she tweets it, I sometimes I will reply, but every time she does, I do take a moment to draft a response and be like, it's okay, I can let, I don't need to
yeah,
engage
Natasha
with my
doesn't
friends
miss, man.
here.
She doesn't miss. She doesn't miss. So I'm gonna go with her as well. Welcome to the resistance. We both hate the Dodgers equally. So, but yeah, like in all seriousness with the Giants thing, I just, and then just from what they've done so
Mhm.
far, I think the pitching's good. I think
Yep.
Lamont Wade continues to be like the most underrated, like not star, but like an underrated, like just solid player,
I feel like
who's in the lineup and whatnot
for
a lot.
someone without an elite tool, and I guess you could say like
Mhm,
his approach is elite, but that's not what we think of when we think of tools in the general scouting report sense,
mhm,
right? Like for someone who does not stand out in the sort of ways we often think about scouting, I feel like there is no one in baseball who impacts games more than Wade. Like
it's a
because
great point.
like he's not an exceptional defensive player, and like again he's solid, he's above average I think at first base, but it's still first base, so there's a limited amount of impact you can
Yep,
have at that
yep.
position. And again, he's not even Brandon Belt defensively at first. Like he's very good, but like he's not like a gold glove in my, at
Mhm,
least from what I've seen from him at first. He's again obviously has average, maybe even slightly below average power, especially for a big league first baseman. Like he doesn't necessarily, I know he's hitting for average right now, but historically he's never been like a big average player. Like yes, he's gotten on base at a great clip, but it's the way he just wears down pitchers. And again, I do feel pretty
mhm.
confident the fact that you now have, especially against right-handed starters, because obviously he's going to sit against lefties. But now you have Jung Hoo Lee and Lamont Wade as like two of the first three hitters that a right-handed starter is going to face. Like that's just going to wear pitchers down in a way that I think Matt Chapman and Jorge Soler and the other and Michael Conforto and other guys in the middle of the Giants lineup are going to benefit from, because it's just, you know, the odds are those are two hitters where even in a 1-2-3 first, those two hitters are probably forcing you to throw at least 10 pitches. Right.
Mhm.
And so like it's just a way in which it just wears pitchers down in a way that I think is super. I mean, it's fun to watch. Like it is, and it's also, I think, just really productive.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think that that's how they're going to have to win, right? They're going to be like a more grindy team. This is not going to be one that has offensive explosions. I just know that they think that they have the superstars like that, albeit as Mark makes a smirk at the screen, like they had that really ridiculous like 19 home run game on Friday.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I mean, the thing is, right, the only way I think, you know, a lot hinges, again, we're both fans of Michael Conforto and actually think his bounce back chances are pretty good, but like, you know, a lot does hinge on If Tyro Estrada and Lamont Wade Jr. are like as good as they were last season and maybe even better, right? Then all of a sudden this lineup gets a lot of length because, again, worst comes to worst, Matt Chapman will still probably be a league average hitter, right? Even if he doesn't
Mhm.
return to his A's
Exactly, yeah.
MVP years. And again, maybe he does, right? Jorge Soler, if he's healthy, will hit a lot of homers, right? Like there are like good hitters in this lineup, but I think there's a lot of average hitters in this lineup, right? And
Mhm.
when you have a lineup of average hitters, you need people. Again, when we talk about the 2021 season, right? The reason the Giants are a 107-win team is because Brandon Belt and Brandon Crawford had the best years of their careers offensively. They were like MVP caliber offensive players from like a at bat standpoint, right? And Buster Posey was really damn good, and it's like they had those three elite bats in the middle of the order that allowed, like, yes, the platoons work and Darren Ruff and Lamont Wade and Austin Slater and Mike Yastrzemski, all those guys, Tyro Estrada, all had real contributions to the lineup. But I felt like that always gets again, maybe over the years as the Giants have sort of regressed in recent years, it's been a bit more fair. But I remember at the time there was so much focus on the pinch hitters and,
Mhm.
look at what the Giants are doing with platoons and they're doing it like no one else.
Yeah.
And we were ignoring the fact that Brandon Crawford was playing every day and again, I think had a stronger case for MVP and deserved a bit more MVP attention than he
I
ended up
do
getting.
too.
You
I do
know,
too.
and Brandon Belt, again, even with his injuries, he only played in 97 games and hit 29 homers.
Yeah.
Which is, and for a guy who already does all the Brandon Belt things that made Brandon Belt a great player anyway, and then
Mhm.
obviously Posey being Posey, like you just had those three elite bats that made it trickle down, right? So like again, I think you're absolutely right. They're going to have to grind out unless you get another All-Star Jorge Soler, a 2018 era Matt Chapman. Right. If you
Yeah.
get those two things or whatever, a Michael Conforto over certain,
Yeah.
someone in that lane, Marco Luciano ends up coming up and hitting 30 homers as a rookie, right? Like things like that, that are probably unlikely, right? Like you need a couple of those things to break. Otherwise, you're a lineup of average hitters. And what the Giants have seen a lot of, and I'm curious what you make of this, because whether you're talking about, hitting with runners in scoring position, you as a Padres fans know all about that from last year. Giants fans know
Yes.
all about that from last year. There is the thing that clutch isn't real. A lot of data analysts will say like runners in scoring position stuff tends to regress to the mean. I'm
Mhm.
curious what your thoughts on that, because I wonder if
Yeah.
lineups like the Giants, where you have a lot of average hitters, I wonder if you're more prone to those struggles. And I'm curious what you think about that.
It's tough because one thing I remember is the formerly the bane of my existence, Eric Hosmer, first baseman for the Padres. He like low key had really good numbers in high leverage and particularly the playoffs. And
Mhm.
now with him, the big reason for that was he'd put the ball in play.
Yeah.
The problem is that it would be ground balls like 90% of the time.
Mhm.
But that's why he could luck into having
Yeah.
a really good postseason sort of performance. I think that's where I headed into this year saying, look, I think clutch is real. I think that it's something that my friend has a theory that it's just you play your normal. That's what clutch allows you to do, and you don't get worse.
Right.
It's not that
Exactly.
you
Like there
get
isn't
better.
there isn't being better in great situations,
Yeah,
but
this
there
isn't
is
an
getting
anime
worse.
power up, right? You
Yeah.
don't go like in the anime when someone goes Super Saiyan at the exact right time, stuff like that, right? Like not necessarily that route. And I think in baseball, it is very much more appropriate. I think in basketball, it's clearly freaking real. I've
Mhm.
watched James Harden enough years. I think in football, it's clearly real. I've watched the Dallas Cowboys for 20 years, right? So it's definitely real in those sports. But for baseball, it's just, especially in the regular season, there tends to be a regression to the mean where it's just, I refuse to believe that the Royals were a better
Mhm.
team than the Padres last year just because they hit with runners and scoring position bad. That's
Yeah.
just a little bit weird to me. And I know it's not the only be all and tell all stat, but it tends to just boost it a little bit. You've got Tatis, you've got Bogarts, you've got all these guys. It should be better. And the Giants, it's, I guess, to be a naysayer for a second, where it's like I do like their batters, but there's a fair thing to be like, well, this isn't Tatis, Machado, and Xander Bogarts and some of these other star players, so we'll have to see how it pans out.
Right. Of the National League West, right? The
Yes,
the
of the National
Giants
League West,
very
yeah,
clearly have the fourth best lineup. Like
yeah,
I don't think, you can nitpick some positions. And again, maybe some of the things I was talking about earlier, Soler, Chapman, whatever, have good years that change this. But
mhm,
I don't think there's anyone who can make a great argument that the Giants have a better lineup than the Padres, have a better lineup than the Dodgers, have a better
mhm,
lineup than the Diamondbacks, right? Like what the Giants' path to success is hinging on is the pitching staff, is the
Yeah.
starting rotation, which again, I think you can make a strong case is at the very least the deepest pitching staff in the National League West. I think that I
Hmm.
don't think there's too much argument there, given how the Dodgers have been hit by injuries. The Padres obviously
Hmm.
have just had thin pitching for a long time now.
Hmm.
But the question whether the Giants have truly the best pitching staff is a bit more up for debate because you have a lot of top end aces in this division. I mean, again, when you're talking about Zach Gallen in Arizona, again, now that they have Montgomery and Eduardo Rodriguez, there obviously Rodriguez is out right now, but um, and the Dodgers a similar situation when it comes to the injuries and health. What do you expect of this Giants rotation right now? Because it has a lot of big names. You obviously have Webb and Snell at the top.
Hmm.
Someone Snell you saw got to know quite a bit over the last few
Yeah.
years. I guess
Yeah.
on a similar note, actually, what is your like Bob Melvin thoughts and Bob Melvin takes? Because the Giants have gone from Gabe Kapler to Bob Melvin, which is undeniably very different, like vibes and energy, at least in the
Hmm.
coverage they get. I think there is quite a different perception among players about those two guys. I actually don't think they're
Yeah.
necessarily that different in terms of how they're going to handle. I mean, again, we're going to see a lot less platoons, but at least when it comes to the pitching side of things, I think it's going to be a
Hmm.
bit more similar than you think. It's more about a personnel change. But yeah, what was your take of Bob Melvin's tenure in San Diego? And you know, Giants
With
fans are already getting frustrated with his bullpen use, but I also feel like fans just get frustrated with every manager's bullpen use. So I'm curious if you think there's
so
something there or
he's
not.
having y'all are having the bullpen thing too.
Okay,
Okay.
so
So
was this a thing in San Diego, and what was it? Yeah.
I think it was for San Diego, but only once. And I
Okay.
disagree with Padres fans in the majority. The playoffs. I think it was borderline inexcusable to leave Robert Suarez in for another inning
I remember this.
against Bryce
Yeah, yeah,
Harper.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying that he stops Harper.
Mhm.
Harper was literally going scorched earth
Yeah.
on the entire league that year. But my thing is bringing Josh Hader. What are we
Mhm.
doing? And
You got haters.
could this have been a situation? And we learned later, which is why I'm going to defend Bob Melvin, where Josh Hader doesn't want to go more than one inning. So maybe this was a situation where he just trusted the matchup and said Suarez throws some gas and he looks like he's back this year. I get it. And last year he had that comment when they asked, why didn't you use Josh Hader? And he was just like, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like very weird, passive aggressive, like
S-
awkward response, and
was
clearly
very
some
much
management
Scott
problems.
Boras has told us that we aren't going to do this, and so I'm
Exactly.
following these rules that I think is kind of BS. Was kind of the
You
energy.
exactly. You have all the adage of Melvin and AJ Preller apparently have an irreconcilable relationship. So that was part of it. But I think that in general, last year I was like, no, like, yeah, the not using Hater, if you had the choice, and frankly, if I find out that Hater wasn't going to pitch in the playoffs, even me wanting guys to get paid, I might be like, bro, can you at least face Bryce Harper? You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? But I think that he was given a bad hand last year. I think that the bullpen, you had a lot of guys regress. You had Tim Hill regress. You had Luis Garcia, who's very good for the team, regress. Robert Suarez is hurt for basically all of last year. So some people, well, why are you putting in Garcia again? He doesn't have anyone. You know what I mean? So I don't think he deserved too much blame there. But I have also heard the same criticism back when he was with the A's.
Mhm.
So this just might be one of his weaknesses. But it's hard for him to blame him for this last year. The Padres had 6 managers under AJ Preller.
It seems
That's
like you
usually
don't have
not,
a big manager
yeah,
take with Melvin, right? Like, which the fact
not
that
too much. No.
which you saw him closely makes me think there
Hmm.
isn't a big take to be had, right? Like, again, I think, you know, of head coaches in pro sports, right? The baseball managers generally, I think the least influential, like at least sort of
Hmm.
general perception. So I think getting
Yeah.
too into that is usually generally a distraction. Again, I wrote kind of as critical as I was of Gabe Kapler. I also thought there's a disproportionate blame on him for how last season, frankly, went for the Giants that I'd put in a similar vein.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so again, getting back to this rotation, like what do you make of Logan Webb, Kyle Harrison, Blake Snell,
Yeah.
Jordan Hicks, Cy Young
Well,
winner, Cy Young favorite,
so
and
I
Keaton
agree
Witten?
with you on the depth. I agree with you on the depth. I think it's possible that they don't have even one of the 5 best starters in the National League West. I personally
Whoa,
do. I personally
whoa,
do. I'm
whoa.
just saying that it's possible that
You could
by
make an
the end of the
argument
year,
if you wanted to, yeah, that Webb
yeah.
sort of
But then
regresses and yeah.
my theory is that you might not have the top 5, but then you'll have 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, like
Mhm.
something like that, where I just think the depth is going to be great. Um, Jordan Hicks was good. And the Padres
Really
just had
good.
this, like really good. The Padres just had this vibe. And I love that contract when it happened because my thing was, okay, if this doesn't work,
You
you
got a setup
slightly
guy.
overpaid
Yeah.
for a really good reliever who's shown a lot of stuff before. And the Padres just had this last year, albeit not quite as talented as a player, but in Seth Lugo,
Mhm.
who was a relief pitcher who then he then transferred to a starter. just really solid, like a solid starter. And I haven't been following him with the Royals, but like a really solid year for
It
them. The
looked like he
Padres
was
have
off to
excellent
a good
pitching.
start last I saw. Yeah.
So you have that, and my thing is Hicks's stuff is better. And okay, the velo drop. I don't really care when the velo drops for a guy like Hicks,
It's also
but
not dropping late in games. It seems very clear
yeah,
that the velo
mhm,
drop is him taking stuff off to have better command, right? This is the crazy Jordan Hicks stat. It's 3 starts, it's 18 innings, it's 2 earned runs. I mean, already insane. But it's Jordan Hicks and it's 18 innings and 3 walks.
yeah,
Like
the control's excellent.
that's the Jordan Hicks stat that I think is standing out because again, like what have the Cardinals been doing? Sorry, I just
No, I mean like it's. I think the other thing is he's maybe not doesn't have like the most strikeouts in the league or anything
Mhm.
like that, but the ground ball stuff is
Yeah.
huge and it's very Logan Webb esque. Like I
Yeah.
think I'm looking at it right now on Savant, like the launch angle on his sinker, which he throws the most, is at 2. So that's a pretty nice start. And then the other pitches, he's got a 39% whiff rate on his sweeper, and then a 46% whiff rate on his split finger. So
Yes.
I'm really impressed with what I've seen from Jordan Hicks so far. I think he's gonna be very good. Kyle Harrison, I can't speak to too much. I saw what was it, just looking on what's it called? Fangraphs. Like he has a let me see if I can find it real. What was the crazy stat that I just found looking at this?
Is it there a
Oh no,
whiff
no.
going up or
Yeah, it was something like that. I lost it, but Kyle Harrison, he's young. It's whatever. We'll see
Mhm.
what happens in that regard. And then Logan Webb, a little bit shaky. It wouldn't shock me if we have like the weird, he was good type of year from Logan Webb, where he'll be a good starter. I have no doubt
Mhm.
about that. He is agonizing to freaking bat against. He drives me nuts when he's on because
Mhm.
it's just it'll dip at the last second. It's all ground
Yeah.
balls with him. So I like Logan Webb, even if he's not necessarily runner up
Mhm.
Cy Young form. I think he'll
Yeah.
be good. And Blake Snell, welcome to the Blake Snell experience, my friend. I think that
10 earned
there's
runs in 7 innings through 2 stars.
I think that people have this urge to dunk on Boris right now. And they want to dunk on not necessarily the Giants, actually, but particularly Boris and Snell and all. See, this is why they didn't pay him. Woo, we
Mhm.
dodged that bullet.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, could he be bad? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But have
Yeah,
y'all not been
Giants fans
watching?
jumped this gun with I want to be clear. I think they've been vindicated in this and like are right. But it was a similar
Mhm,
energy like Giants fans were doing this was Carlos Rodon last year, right? When he got off to like had
mhm.
one bad start with the Yankees. And again, like it looks like that contract is going to be bad and Rodon's not going to right the ship here. But it's also
Yeah,
like 2 stars doesn't tell you that, right? Like you need to
yeah.
give it a bit more time to figure it out. Yeah.
And especially with Snell. He was bad to start the Padres season last year.
Mhm.
He was bad the year before that. He always starts slow. I would say that the one difference with his start this year with the Giants is that he signed late. And
Yeah.
I know that I can't speak for, what the spring training buildup is like.
Mhm.
But for a guy like him, I do think that that says a lot. And maybe that's going to affect him just a little bit. But in general, this is how he's always been. He's been a really slow starter with the Padres. His first year with the Padres, he was pretty bad until the last 2 months of the season when he just went crazy and he was
Mhm.
striking guys out all the time. But like, I'm looking at last year, like 4 1/3, he gives up 3, 3 2/3 gives up 4, 5 innings gives up. What is this? I see 4 earned runs here, then
Mhm.
2, then and then he gives up 6 against Boston last year. I remember that, and that drove me insane. And everyone's like, okay, here we go. Like
Mhm.
we
It's
wanted
going to be a
something out of
bad
him.
Blake Snell season, right?
And then he turns it on, and it won't always look pretty, but you will look up, you will get some pitching ninja strikeouts. It's just way too early with him. And I will say, if it goes bad, I think he'll be great next year. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he's not going to be bad 2 years in a row. I just think this is the Blake Snell experience. He deserves a lot more of a weight compared to other pitchers who start off poorly because
Mm.
this is literally always what he does every single year. This is what he does, pretty much, at least when he was with the Padres. So I wouldn't be it's a concern more so because of the late signing for me, not because of what he's
Mhm.
actually done. I would be worried about that. But other than that, I like all of their freaking pitching, man. I think it could be good. Camilo Duvall, while Graham Pauley did shove him in a locker, along with Eggy Rosario and throw away the key, I did enjoy that very much. Camilo Duvall is going to be great too, and I think the bullpen will be fine overall. That's what this
By the
team's
way,
getting.
Camilo Doval, someone another slow starter. He has
Mm,
been gotten off to bad starts every season of his career, dating back to the minor leagues. This was a
mm,
thing in the minors with him too. It's he always just was someone who his it was pretty incredible. Like at low A and single A, it was like if you removed his first two appearances in back-to-back years, it lowered his ERA, but more than a run over the course of the season. Like it was just like he's always been someone who it felt like needed some time to kind of settle into his rhythm as well.
Yeah, exactly, and I think all of this is why, like, when I cross over with, Ben Caspick of
Mhm.
Locked On Giants on Locked On Padres podcast, um, that I think the Giants are, like, a team that really could be a second half burner. You get
Yeah,
Robbie Ray back in the second half of the season, which
who
is
might be in the
not
bullpen.
who might be in the bullpen. He's look, I used to love Robbie Ray, but now he's like good in theory, so it's not as fun. I used to like him when he was the Joey Gallo of pitchers,
Yeah, yeah,
where you're either seeing him on Pitching Ninja, he's giving up a walk or nuke.
yeah. Mhm.
Like it was no in between, and then he wins the Cy Young, goes to the Mariners. I think his time with the Mariners was actually a little bit overhated. I think
Mhm.
he was
He
okay.
was
It's
solid.
just
Yeah.
that he was solid, and I you add that to this rotation, that means a lot. So
Mhm.
as long as you don't pitch him against the Astros, I think that that's going to be a big um, addition for them too. And I think Jung Ho Lee's only going to get better. I'd be curious to see what this team does at the deadline. I can't get a vibe of like what they, I don't know, like what their resource asset
I mean,
management is at the
it's
point,
kind
but
of honestly similar to the big league club. They have, I think they have a relatively solid system, but I mean, it's one of those things. It depends what you're trying to add, right? I don't think they have pieces they're willing to trade to get a true like controllable impact piece. But I think they have plenty if they want to get a rental. Whether it's in the right now, like I think you would look at the depth chart and say it would be the things you're looking at would be a shortstop and it would be a left-handed reliever, right? Are probably
mm,
the two things. And shortstop's probably sort of aspirational. One thing I should have mentioned when you mentioned Hicks with the sinker, Webb with the sinker, and we talked about Nick Ahmed earlier. A reason I think the Giants are going to be very patient with Nick Ahmed is in part of that reason. You have Logan Webb, you have Jordan Hicks, these dudes who keep the ball on the ground and they feast on balls in play. And right now you have Matt Chapman at third, you got Nick Ahmed at short, you got Tyro Estrada at second. Three players, all of whom you can make a case are the best defensive players at their position in the league. Like all three who, by
mm-hmm.
the metrics,
Yeah,
are in those have been in those conversations fairly
yes,
consistently. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that you've had those three guys and Jordan Hicks has gotten off to a really great start, right? Like
yeah,
even though he's only, I think it's 13 strikeouts in 18 innings, right? Which is not what you would have expected to be the recipe for Jordan Hicks' success, right? I would have expected the like high end of Jordan Hicks starter success to be a lot of 5 innings, 2 runs, 4 walks, and like 10 strikeout type of outings.
mm-hmm.
And instead, he's been working into games. He's been really pitch efficient. And it's in large part, I think, because he's putting trust in his infield and it's paying off.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to the runners in scoring position conversation, I think the one concern I always have because I don't buy into like clutch as like a sort of like mental choice you have to make. I don't believe the Giants
Mm-hmm.
hitters or like players in these situations. Like I don't think there's that many players that fold in those moments, particularly in the regular season, right? Like I can see, again, the playoffs is a different animal when it comes to clutch and the pressure and the sort of way you have to kind of deal with your own ego in those moments and your own understanding of in keeping perspective. In the regular season, a runner on second base with 1 out is not a high pressure situation. I don't care in the first 3 months of an MLB season, there's not pressure in those situations, unless
Mm-hmm.
it's like a rivalry game, right? And the thing that I worry about is that it's not a symptom of hitter issues, it's a pitcher intensity thing. It's that because the Giants don't have those star hitters, that they're getting on base because pitchers are sort of, I don't need to be as precise right now with my command. I don't need to be as sharp with my
Mm-hmm.
stuff right now. There's no one on base. We're up 2-0, or
Mm-hmm.
it's a 1-1 game, whatever. It's early. I'm trying to work deep in this game. And so then you give up the single to Jung Hoo Lee, or maybe you give up the double to Lamont Wade. And now it's Michael Conforto or Matt Chapman, or it's Tyro Estrada, it's Nick Ahmed at the plate. And now, okay, now there's a runner on second. I, as a pitcher, am going to lock in and I'm going to be more precise now. I'm going to throw a bit sharper. My velo, I'm going to be making a few more of those high effort pitches. And so my concern when it comes to the Giants, because again, this has now been pretty close to a year now that there's had pretty strong runners in scoring position struggles, which again,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think are as extreme as are borne out right now, but I also don't necessarily think there's going to be regression that's on the other side of the positives. You know what I mean? And my concern would be is that that's what's happening. The Giants are getting a lot of people on base because the Giants aren't necessarily like they're good at being patient but
Mhm.
pitchers are, kind of able to be a bit more casual because they aren't worried about the lineup destroying them. Like, yeah, I can afford to walk this hitter because I'm not worried about the next guy hitting the 2-run
Mhm.
homer in the way I might be against the Padres, in the way I might be against the Dodgers or Diamondbacks, right?
Yeah.
And so the Giants are getting a lot of people on base. They are hitting the ball hard, but it's actually those things might be a function of pitchers sort of being a little more, for lack of a better word, like saving their intensity for the higher stress
Mhm.
situations because they're able to get by elsewhere. So then that gap, there may be some of that gap in there because, again, you lack that elite talent. Now,
Mhm.
we'll see. I mean, again, Jung Hoo Lee, I think, could be an elite talent. Like Matt Chapman and Soler, again, these guys we're mentioning could be in that space. I think
Mhm.
on the rotation side, it's just really interesting because, man, Logan Webb, Blake Snell, and what Jordan Hicks is looking like as a three-headed monster on top of a rotation is wild to think about,
Yeah.
like what that can do. Like those
Mhm.
are like the Jordan Hicks you're seeing right now is a like potential October starter as well
Mhm.
because his stuff is that good, right? Like this isn't just again, like they basically replaced Anthony DeSclafani with Jordan Hicks, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like,
Yeah.
and there was, and again, DeSclafani in 2021 was very good for the Giants. He was not viable in the postseason in that way. It just is a
Yeah.
different animal of lineups and intensity and
Mhm.
preparation you're dealing with, right? Jordan Hicks, again, it's early. This could be a mirage. There's absolutely likely going to be some fades and durability questions and all that stuff,
Mhm.
but it's looking like it. I think the interesting thing is there's more upside outside of Robbie Ray, and it's Kyle Harrison and Keaton Winn. You have two rookies on this pitching staff.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jackson
Yeah.
Merrill for Rookie of the Year. Kyle Harrison and Keaton Winn could pitch their way into that conversation as well because they are opening day in the rotation and are presumably have a chance to be in the rotation all year long for the Giants. And both of them are really enticing in different ways. Obviously, Kyle Harrison's been the best left-handed pitching prospect in the league for multiple years, I'd say now, and he's arguably was the best pitching prospect heading into this year, depending on who you asked. And again, we saw last year, I believe it was against San Diego, right, where we racked up 10 strikeouts in his home debut at Oracle,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
the fastball is incredible. The slider and changeup both have potential, although his ability to locate them and generate whiffs with them has come and go, and we'll see if he can get the consistency and the command together to be effective. But like this is a dude who is really young to be in a big league rotation. Like something friend of the podcast, friend of mine, Roger Munter, has talked about is that starting pitcher as player development has gotten younger and younger, and teams have been forcing players to the major leagues earlier and earlier. That's really a position player thing. Starting pitchers have gotten older and older. Like there are not many early 20s starters right now, and Kyle Harrison is one of them. And there's both potential in that, but I think there's also the thing where I I'm realizing now as we get into the season and perhaps the expectations for the Giants, um, the depth of their rotation is kind of on this two timelines thing, not to bring too much Warrior talk in, but you have Kyle Harrison, you have Keaton Winn, an older rookie, but who has a 98 mile per hour fastball and a splitter that he can locate for strikes. Like a really impressive combo, induces a lot of soft contact. He's flashed a slider this year that might help him get some more swing and miss. He's worked 16 innings and 3 starts, which for a rookie on the pitch counts he's going to be on is pretty is impressive enough.
Mhm.
But I think that is sort of the question. I think for the Giants, like what Harrison and Wynn are is going to make whether this Giants have a good rotation or like the type of like all decade rotation that it probably takes for them to be a 90-95 win team without some
Mhm.
offensive explosion, right? Because again, Webb, Snell are going to be good. Even Snell's bad years are good rotation years. Hicks is
Mhm.
a little more up in the air, but again, I'm starting to be pretty bullish on his expectations. And the question is Kyle Harrison and Keaton Winn, is this going to be a year that we look at the end of it and say Kyle Harrison and Keaton Winn are already MLB mid-rotation starters, are already 3 starters or better, or already good 4 starters? Or is it going to be we get to the end of the year, Keaton Winn and Kyle Harrison, hey, you both had great years for where you're at in your career, and we see you're going to be that in next year, right? Because those two things are very different in what they mean for the win losses of this Giants team. That at the moment, that's 40% of their games are going to be started by those two guys, right? Like as
Mhm.
good as Snell and as good as Snell, Webb, and Hicks are, right? If we say that top three is going to be that good, and even if Hicks fades, that Ray will replace him, which again is not a guarantee. Dudes just get hurt, right? Like beside the fact
Oh
of
yeah.
right?
Especially
Whether they're
as of
good,
late, right? Yeah.
especially as of late, right? Even if you say you're going to win 2 out of 3 of those games, right? Like at the end of the year, those 3 starters, the Giants are going to win 2 out of 3 games, right? That's a massive pace, right? That's a great pace. They got to finish 500 or pretty close to 500 in those Keaton win Kyle Harrison starts to average it out and still end up a 90-95 win team. If that's where, if again, you're talking about getting into the playoffs, which for the Giants team that has been to the playoffs once since 2016, right? Like that is a big deal. And this is a roster that I think is built for the postseason because their strength is pitching, right? The lineup, we
Mhm.
don't know, right? We don't know exactly. Like, again, I don't think there's a lot of hitters we'd say, oh, these are October hitters,
Yeah.
but you get to the rotation, you get to the playoffs, you go down to a 3 or 4 man rotation. All of a sudden, Kyle Harrison's a lefty out of the bullpen. Keaton Wynn's a righty out of the bullpen. And again, there aren't going to be teams that can line up a Webb, Snell, and if Hicks is that guy, rotation in October. And that's going to be a potential upside. Again, that's the recipe for, frankly, the Giants dynasty teams, right? Like a lot of those teams, the
Yeah.
lineups didn't stack up, but it was that, especially in 2010 or in 2012, but when we get to, our one starter is probably going to beat your one starter. And even if they don't, our 2 and 3 are going to be better than your 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And that's the recipe here, right? But so much hinges on, again, they're in that division. They're in this division that is
Mhm.
has just so much talent, man. It's going to be fun to watch.
I
I'm
know.
really excited for the season.
I'm excited for it too. And hey, like in terms of just making the playoffs, that's probably a big question. And hey, look, every year there are teams that make the playoffs that don't make it the next year. That's just how sports works. I think we already have the answer to one of the teams, frankly, that made the playoffs in the National League that will not be back this upcoming year. My condolences to honestly just fans in general of the Miami Marlins, because it just must suck that you're like, see you to the GM,
Yeah,
see
we're
you
going to
to our
get rid of Kim
manager,
Hang.
and then also our best pitching prospect who's had 3 great starts, we're dropping him because reasons. Okay. So that's again, it stinks. So that's one team that's out.
Assistant general manager Gabe Kapler.
Look, I mean, there's some teams in here like if I'm the Giants and I head into a playoff season, and this is very early, I don't know like what the full thing is going to happen, but like if for some reason the Brewers BS their way
Mhm.
into a wild card spot, there are barely any teams that I fear less than that
Yeah.
team.
I mean,
They're
the
just
NL
not.
Central in general, right? Like
NL
if
Central
I would be like,
merchants,
the
man.
Reds are really the only ones that like I feel like roster upside just
Yeah,
because they're so young. And even
yeah.
then, the Reds are a really
They're
flawed
the
team right now,
upstarts.
right? Yeah,
They're the
exactly.
upstarts.
Yeah.
They're the upstarts that is the type of team that the Dodgers lose to inexplicably in the playoffs. Like that's what the type of thing that would happen there. Or a little bit of the Pirates. A little bit. A little bit.
Joey Bart, by the way, he has played 3 games with the Pirates and has 2 home runs and is hitting 400. I'm a Joey Bart believer. I will stand by it.
Oh, you're a believer. I didn't know that.
I'm a believer in that. I think he's like Mike Zunino light at the worst. Like I think
Ooh,
that,
yeah, no, that's good.
like
Yeah.
it's been very weird because my Joey Bart evaluation has been basically the same since he was drafted. Because it went during the draft, I was like, I don't want the Giants to pick him at number 2 because I think at best this is Mike Zunino, and
Mhm.
he's probably going to be a bit worse than Mike Zunino. That's not a lot of ceiling for the number 2 pick. But then as everyone went to, he's not even a AAA player. It's like, no, this is I think a solid backup catcher at a minimum.
It-
And I think I do really think and again, I hope there's some internal reflection if Bart does go on to have success. I think there have been ways in which the Giants have handled players, particularly on the player development side. Some players have been able to overcome it, but
yes.
some haven't,
Yes.
where there have just been mental effects of just the way they've approached things that have added weight to an already
Mhm.
high pressure situation. And to be fair to the Giants, part of that is just the bad luck of whoever once the Giants took a catcher in the first round after Buster Posey, that player is going to be named the next Buster Posey, and that's unfair to
Right.
Bart, and that's going to be on
Mhm.
him. And then they take Patrick Bailey, which again was a good
Yankees with
first round.
Jeter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
stuff
again,
like that.
and then they take Patrick Bailey once Saidi comes into town. So there's
Yeah.
another catcher you're getting replaced. Like I don't blame them for either of those realities, but I think there were things in between. I think, and again, I think they've had a very dogmatic approach to player development in terms of like, you need to take pitches, you need to avoid strikeouts, which for a player like Bart, who historically hadn't taken a lot of pitches, historically had strikeout lots, and had a profile that to play probably was going to have to strike out a lot. I think it just, he got in his own head, right? And I think it
Yeah.
was like he was so focused on not chasing and so focused on not striking out that he stopped being able to swing aggressively enough to get into his power. Like the fact
Mhm.
that if you look at Joey Bart's AAA stats last year, that is the stats of someone who is absolutely, I think, just deflated with where they're
Mhm.
at in professional baseball. And again, we'll see. He's ultimately just the backup catcher in Pittsburgh right now. We'll see where he ends up. But no, Pittsburgh.
I know,
I
man.
can't get
The
fully
Brian
behind you as
Hayes
they're an
thing,
upstart, but
I like some of their bats. You got
oh yeah,
Cruz. The Brian Hayes thing, I thought he was Andrelton Simmons, but
mm,
which is not a bad thing, by the
right.
way. But I meant in terms of the offense. But
Yeah,
he's
it's like a
been
Brandon
basically
Crawford
really
type
good.
profile, right? Yeah,
Yeah, but he's been hitting like there's been data that has shown that he might be getting better, and he's still super young, so
yeah.
he's there. I think Brian Reynolds has been one of the most overrated players in the league for like 2 years, but he's still pretty good. I only say that because I've never seen a play, and I wrote about this in Just Baseball too, because I'm petty. I've never seen a player in more trade rumors in my life with the stature that wasn't Mickey Mantle. You know what I mean? Like he was treated like
There is the
everyone
thing
knew
that
this
this is
guy
kind of like
because
Kevin
of the
Love
trade
with
reports.
Minnesota, right? It's like the
Oh,
thing that
that's a great comp.
it's
Yeah.
it's the thing where, and Tip, I want to be clear. I'm not with you. I think Brian Reynolds is a really good player. Although I
Okay.
do like joking with my dad that he hasn't performed the bright lights are on, just as a joke, because I like annoying my dad by saying it. But there is a thing, right? Bad teams that most people don't watch. You look at the stats, you say, okay, here's a bad team. Here's a good player on a bad team that my team could lose. And then they end up in a bunch of trade talks for that reason,
Exactly. Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
most people haven't seen them play or have seen them play once or twice,
Exactly.
are going
Yeah.
off the
Yeah.
box score. And like, this would be fun to plug and play, which again, I think Brian Reynolds is a really good player, but there is
He's
the thing
good.
of, because he is in rumors a lot, it is then like, we could get in, like he's going to be the bat that puts us over the top. So you end
Look,
up in that positive association with him.
I understand it's just reports. I understand it's engagement, but that BS that said they're looking for a Soto package drove me up a wall. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm still mad over the Soto package for what it's worth. But yeah, like we'll see. We'll see. I think that the National League is just a little bit more interesting this year in
Mm,
a lot of ways because I think that, Milwaukee, I think that they'll go down. I think they've been hitting too well with
yeah.
runners in scoring position. That's another thing. It could go both ways.
Yes.
I think they'll fall down a little bit. The Cubs are frisky. The Reds could be that upstart team. Um, Cardinals again, they might be cooked. They're not. I don't.
It's
Is it
wild
time? Can I
for
say it?
that they're done already at 7-9. You're ready to call
No,
the
not.
Cardinals cooked?
No, not that. A specific thing.
What? Go for it.
Is Arenado finished?
Wow.
Are we like? I'm just asking a question. He's got an 83 WRC plus right now. He's not walking the same. His swing looks a little weird.
His swing
And
has,
what I
yeah,
don't
this is
like
like a
is that
weird
the
hitch.
defense, he had quite possibly his only bad defensive year of his career last year.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of wondering, like, is this it? Because if it is, that's a big deal because then their second best player is Goldschmidt, who I think is I think he'll still be good this year. No,
Mhm.
no doubt in my mind. I'm not worried about him. He'll be fine.
Mhm.
But, you know, is it time? Like, are they good? Is the reign of the boring team that everyone likes making fun of like over? I don't know, man. Like, there's something about that team. Tyler O'Neill, who they gave up on, is killing it with the
He's
Red
killing
Sox
it.
right
Jordan
now.
Hicks again. You got Zach Gallen in Arizona. You got Alcantara in Miami. You got all the guys they've
Dave,
traded, and they're kind of in the Giants territory. Honestly, it's a bit worse than the Giants because they've been like a top 100 prospect darling for a long time. And I don't say this like, I
mhm,
mean, like as someone who has done a lot of prospect ranking stuff, and I'm like, I love
yeah,
Jordan Walker. I love Mason Wynn. Again, Jordan Walker looks like a good player. We'll see if Mason Wynn's bat can catch up to his glove. That's so incredible to watch.
yeah,
But there has been the thing of they've had so many of these top prospects,
I
and
know.
many of them have turned into elite players, but none of them have turned into elite players on the Cardinals. And at some point, you have to wonder about the internal evaluation. Again, Adolis
Exactly.
Garcia, right? And the another quintessential one, right? Like you have to ask questions about not just the player development internally, but the ability to evaluate internally on which guys are getting the opportunities over which guys. And again, like players like Tyler O'Neill and Jordan Hicks, who pretty much as soon as they leave seem to be doing better than they were in St. Louis. And that's the tough thing. Because again, baseball is that sport where the coaching is so unquantifiable, and luck is so inherent to I guess coaching everywhere is unquantifiable
Mhm,
to a large degree. That makes no sense. But but so much of baseball is luck, and figuring out
mhm,
what is noise is impossible. Like, to be fair to Arenado, he might just not be trying as hard. Like,
mhm,
like that's the thing too, right? Like, we've seen a lot of players who are very good players who we think they're done. And then like the Giants, I think in this way, like Brandon Crawford and Brandon Belt, I think part of the reason those 2021 seasons were the best year of their career is because I think they knew it was Buster Posey's last season.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I think they were digging deeper than they were. For what it's worth, Crawford was also in a contract year. But like, I think there was an element of Posey was in that clubhouse treating it like it was the last one he had. And no matter how bad your knees hurt, no one was hurting in that clubhouse more than Buster Posey. No one was doing more post game work to
true,
catch another game than Buster Posey
true,
was. Even though he only played like 97, 99 games that year, Buster Posey, what he was going through was something that any other player in that clubhouse, you I could not convince you there's anyone who would not push a bit harder seeing him doing that
mhm,
at his age with all that on the line.
mhm,
And on the flip side, like, when Posey's gone the following years, like, I don't think it's a coincidence that you see Belt and Crawford take a step back. And some of that's just perhaps because they were hurt because they pushed further the year before, maybe
maybe
further than
it's
they
just
should
the
have. But
vibes, who
yeah, it's
knows,
just the
you know what I mean?
vibes, right? Like, it's
And
just everyone
I
at your
or go
job,
ahead, yeah,
you have had
mhm,
jobs where you do
yeah,
better work some days and you do worse work other days. And sometimes it is genuinely because the people you're around, you're just not as motivated to do it. There's
yeah,
just some people
there's
you're
just an
around.
energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people provide energy, and here's another thing I wanna add, slightly to go on with the Cardinals. I haven't I've been workshopping this. It's not even a theory, but just a pattern where it's like every time a team has a knack or known for being smart and doing
Oh yeah, that
stuff,
falls apart in 5 years. That's it.
it
Player
falls
development's the same
apart.
way. Scouting's the same way.
It falls apart and it takes everybody like 3 years to notice.
Yeah. Hmm.
What I mean, here's a good example. So like I'll start with football, frankly. The New York Giants
Hmm.
had a lot of good vibes,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden it's like, we're gonna trade the best receiver we've ever had. What? Why? We're
Yep.
gonna sit the guy specifically before he breaks the record for most consecutive starts.
Yep.
Shout out Eli Manning. Philip Rivers was better. And then you
Geno
have
Smith was better too, though.
Geno Smith. Oh, and fair enough. I mean, he's the
In
god. He's
fairness.
the Geno Christ, right? Um, and then the Cardinals, they could be that team right now
Yeah.
because
The Giants
I
were that
was,
team at one point, right? Because you have the
yeah,
Giants string
yeah,
of Posey and Crawford, and because they have that, in
Hunter
2014,
Pence.
right? And it's sort of like, oh, this player development. But the thing is, the drafts had kind of started to dry up. They traded Zach Wheeler, like 2014, 15 was already starting to dry up. But because they spent in free agency, they prolonged it to 2016. It didn't really get, I think, the public perception reaction until we get to like 18, 19. And even then, there were still some people, it's like, it's still, they got Crawford, Posey, and Belt. And by the time they had the 2021, no one saw it coming. But like, I think the Giants were that team at one point. I think the Cardinals are a team that you could definitely make a pretty damn strong case are in that. And that's the question for the Orioles, right? Who like are currently that darling. Like, the Astros, right, who have seemingly been able to sustain it. The Dodgers, who seemingly been able to sustain it. But the Dodgers, did they sustain it through player development, or did they sustain it because they've been able to churn enough of the prospect capital to go and get a Mookie Betts, to go and get, or to go and pay and get Shohei Ohtani and other things? You know, that's the $1 million question, right?
We'll have to see. And then it's
$1 billion,
like
I guess.
there's all, and because like one of the things I brought up was how when Mike Schultz was fired, my thing was like, okay, I'm cool that the Padres hired him, but hey, the Cardinals are usually pretty smart. Maybe they know something. Maybe they did it. You know what I mean? Maybe they didn't. And these things flip. New York Knicks in basketball, they're usually the joke. All of a sudden, they're the only team in the league that knows what they're doing. So
Okay,
these things,
chill out.
I know, you know what I mean?
New York coming in hot.
All I'm saying is, I'm so sick of hearing about the Warriors, man. I'm sorry. I need enough. Enough. I can't take it anymore. It's them and the Lakers are driving me literally batshit insane.
And on that
Yeah, but
note, since
yeah.
Javi has turned off the entire fan base and listenership, we've already gone way over what we were shooting for anyway. This is how, Javi, we get together and we record the longest podcasts on our respective podcast shows.
Literally ever,
That's
yeah.
every time we
Every
don't do
time.
it. I don't know whether this was enjoyable. I hope you enjoyed it at home. If you're still with us, we thank you a lot because we had a blast doing it. This
Yeah.
has been the Bayside SF Giants talk show. Javi, where can folks follow you and get to know your work more if they want to check, if they want to get more of this energy?
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. At Javapeno, best Twitter handle in the game, JAVIIPENO. And then also you can follow Just Baseball, where I write a bunch over there. I'm currently writing on Profar. You might see that when it comes up. Just a fun little article because he is awesome and I love his smile. So you can check that out. And then also Baseball versus the World. If you don't care about Padres stuff, which I imagine a lot of people might not necessarily who listen to this, Marc was on that episode. We did crazy, ridiculous predictions, and they were absolutely ridiculous. Once a week, every Tuesday, just fun baseball culture type of topics. I recently did a couple of interviews with some really great authors. So go check that out. And otherwise,
Down
watch
with the
One Piece.
Dodgers. Watch
Watch
One
One
Piece.
Piece. Incredible, incredible work of art.
Have
It's
you
peak
seen
fiction.
Ace of Diamond,
Ace of Diamond?
baseball
No, I
anime?
have not. Oh, I've heard of this though. No, I've heard of it. And it's in fact, one fun thing about anime is they all feature baseball at some point. I
That's true.
recommend everyone go
That's
look
true.
up Samurai Champloo's baseball episode because it's very, very like it's like a mock fest of American
Pat Ellington and
culture, and
I
it's
have
very
been
funny.
Ace of Diamond stands for a long time, and are absolutely all in on that all in on
I
that
need to
series.
I need to watch it. I need to watch it. They love baseball, man. Jeff Head is crazy about baseball, and oh man, it's good stuff. So yeah, everyone go check that out if you would like. And yeah, just enjoy life out there, folks.
Thank you all for listening. This has been the Bayside SF Giants Talk Show. Next week, Kerry Crowley will be back in the seat with me. Unfortunately, Javi's been fired as soon as he's been hired. And if you like this, make sure to like and subscribe and comment, or just comment and let us know you never want Javi back. Or if you want Javi to take my job. Either way, we'll be back next week. If you like what we're doing, again, like and subscribe. If you are have a little bit extra, want to support, make sure consider joining our Patreon, patreon.com/Bayside Baseball, to help us do a lot of the cool work here. Obviously, we have this Weekly Giants podcast. As I mentioned, Natasha and Steven co-hosting a bi-weekly podcast on other Bay Area baseball. That's obviously a lot of Oakland A's, but also the independent leagues. Steven went out to the Oakland Ballers open tryout. They just signed Kelsey Whitmore, among some other players. They recapped that on Saturday. And every Wednesday, we're going to be coming out with some long form stuff. So last week, Giants pro scout, former outfielder Jalal Leach sat down with Natasha and Steven for a long form interview in our show Bayside Chats. And I'm GMing a baseball tabletop role
Yes, you
playing
are.
Dungeons and Dragons
Yes,
show
you are.
called Critical Hit as well. That one episode is already out if you want to check that out. And on our Patreon, we're doing extended interviews, talkbacks from the show, a bunch of cool stuff, and just supports what we're doing. So thank you all again for watching, and we'll see you next week.